How do you overcome these kinds of obstacles and truly build an organization or have a situation where there are things that are handled that you do not need to oversee or know about or care about?
So
if you decide that you want a business that's scalable, if you decide you want a business that you can hand off to someone and not have to be staring at the ceiling late at night hoping that payroll has been done or that employees have been checked in with, that the process has been followed, you just have to be really serious about it.
if you can teach the principles for how to think behind decision making, now you start building autonomous performers. In the beginning, we're focused on 100 things, right? They are going to be focusing on a few things. So they should be able, with your principles, to become better than you in a shorter period of time. And if you're an excellent developer of talent, you'll see that happen.
I don't delegate things for like 3 reasons. One is, welcome to the Millionaire Hairstylist, where our mission is to improve the financial well-being of creative professionals. Whether you're a business owner or a single hairstylist or creative with one virtual or in-person assistant, you know how difficult it is to truly delegate the myriad things you need to accomplish to grow your business. That's exactly what we cover in this conversation between myself and our founder, celebrity hairstylist, Cash Lawless. We talk about how to truly delegate and how to avoid the trap of the, it's just easier if I do it myself isms. If we've brought you value in our newly relaunched podcast, would you mind helping us let others know about it? Open the podcast app that you're using to listen or watch this right now. Scroll down and leave us a 5-star review. Let us know why this podcast means something to you so we can share it with others. And if you're watching on YouTube, you know the drill. Like and subscribe. Here's Cash Lawless and myself talking about how not to suck at delegating.
What do I do, Jordan? What do I do with this hair? Do I put a hat on? Do I leave this?
You know, it used to be every time you sat down, you looked perfect. And then now I feel like you've gotten into hat land, and every time you sit down, your hair looks like it just went through the war.
Well, when we first started, I had a little more margin on the schedule to set these things aside. Now it's, oh, I have that. Okay, what are we doing? That's how the appointments go now.
It's terrible. What's that arc of delegating things? Because I think that's something that you and I were talking about, and we talk about so much, is this idea of who versus how, right? So this idea that when you're building a business and you're building a successful business, and look at this, the light just changed out my window here. So now I look like I'm definitely like, I'm in a basement somewhere. It'll change with time. But it's like, instead
of the lotion on, that's kind of the vibe you have going on over there. It puts the lotion on the mask. Yeah. What kind of lampshades are you running over there?
Oh, yeah, you don't want to know. But we talk so much about who, not how, right? It's this idea of stop obsessing with how to run your business and start thinking about who can run your business. Stop obsessing with how to be better at marketing and who can make you better at marketing. And so this idea of strategic delegation, you like to say that like you're only really good at 2% of things that happen in your business. Everything else needs to be ultimately handled by somebody else. And I know not everyone aspires to that, but in theory, for most businesses, that's where success lies. But you, me, and then we were just discussing your business partner / wife / superstar human being, Coco. You know, I think we all have a consistent challenge, which is we're not good at delegating. And I don't even know that I totally understand why, because I cannot tell you the number of times that you and I have had conversations about projects even within this business where I will say, this time I'm going to hand it off to X. And then 5 weeks later, it's, oh, but I still haven't done that thing because I needed to do that. And it still needed to be on my plate. And do you experience that? Is this something that you still run into and still have to process and work through?
Yeah, absolutely. All the time. You always, I mean, it's a mentality and it's a skill and it's something you hone, because here, what I've realized, and I've learned recently, that delegation is for high achievers is extremely difficult. For example, you have a high, I'm going to use the sports analogy, which is stupid. I don't even watch sports. So
neither do I.
Yeah. So neither of us know anything about sports. The guy who scores the most points on the court, right, is usually not the guy who's great at passing the ball and getting the team to do their stuff. Right. They're scoring, and really should they be doing something else? But then eventually, you know, that career ends, and many of these people, you know, think about going on to do other things. And it's very difficult to move from player to coach, and very few do it successfully, because just because you're great at getting things done and playing the game and knowing the game doesn't mean you have the same skill set to get others to play at that same level. In fact, it is so uncommon that happens in both in sports and in the business world, because they are literally two different people. Let me give you an example. Did Michael Jordan's coach win the same amount of championships as Michael Jordan? No. Serena Williams, Did her coach win the same amount of champion? No, none of these coaches.
Wait, time out. I actually do think that Michael Jordan's coach was there. Phil Jackson was there for all of the championships that he won. So just technically,
on the
case.
court. On the court. What do you mean? What do you mean off the court? So if you think about Jordan playing the game, Michael Jordan playing the game, Michael Jordan's coach, the main developer of his talent.
Yes.
Before Jordan's career, was that person, did that person do as much on the court as Michael Jordan?
Or did you're absolutely right.
They were a developer, a masterful developer of talent, and Michael Jordan was the talent, right? So when you think about this, it's two completely different people, two completely different roles. So here's one mistake people make in business. You have a high performer, and then you move into management. And then they suck at managing because they don't have the skill set for development of talent. It's a totally different skill set and aptitude set. It's a different person. So when you think about,
but what if you are the high performer, which most entrepreneurs are? Like, let's be honest. If you are a stylist, if you're a tattoo artist, if you're anyone who is smart enough, hardworking enough to build their own business, and then you build it to some level of success where you're ready to start hiring people, you are the superstar, you are the high performer, and now you have to manage a person. So you're like stuck between a rock and a hard place. You have to go do this thing that in theory you may not actually be best equipped to do.
Yeah, and that is why most of the time I suggest hiring a manager, a general manager, a COO, whatever level you're gonna be putting a person at, because you're gonna have to acquire certain roles and talent, right? Personal assistant, for example, or an assistant would be a great first hire. Now, that person should have the aptitude to look at what you do and take administrative low-level skill tasks off your plate. That does not mean you should not have to develop that skill and talent in that person. They should come in and make your life easier right away through their natural aptitudes, because what they're doing is low-skill labor. It doesn't take masterful training to get them to do, and so that you can spend more of your 80%. The thing that you do, sorry, your 20%, the 20% that you do that produces 80% of those results, you want to be putting more and more focus on that. So you're kind of getting rid of the things that don't require masterful skill. Now, at a certain point, you may want to transition out of the role where you are developing talent in the same way that you were performing. And that takes systemization, organization, having the right people on board, creating the bandwidth, creating the margin, in order to be able to do that. And that's why it's so difficult for people to make this transition. It's not impossible, but very rarely is the high performer also a great developer of talent. I just haven't seen it in a lot of cases.
Okay, but here's what I see happen a lot, and I'm curious what you've experienced. And just to background for the audience is that, when I first met you and you were a solo hairstylist, you were a team of one. Right. And maybe you'd have some on-set assistants. And over time, actually, you started working with Coco. And I remember she would come to cuts with you and she'd be working your phone bookings and handling. So you were kind of like a 1+, right?
Yeah.
And then I saw you go get into real estate, and it was you and Coco. So you were a 2-person team. And then I watched you start to hire people. And then I would say it's like a bell curve, right? It's 1 person and then 2 and then 3. And I've watched that hockey stick go up, especially over the last couple of years. I've watched you go from the person who was doing absolutely everything yourself to the person that has your chief operations officer, to someone who has a CFO, to someone who has all these people within the various businesses that you own that get things done for you. But what I've noticed happens is everyone starts, again, I do think that the creative entrepreneur is often the first high performer. They're the first Michael Jordan on the court for themselves and their business.
Yeah, they're doing everything.
Certainly you and I have been that in this business, right? Where when it was just the two of us, and we did all the content creation, all the writing, all the website development, all the editing, and then we started over time to add people. But what I find happens with me is I don't delegate things for 3 reasons. One is I'm not quite sure what it is I want to accomplish, so I'm not clear on what it is I'm trying to hand off to someone. Number 2 is I'm not sure if the person I'm delegating to is going to do it exactly the way that I want it done or to my level of standard. So therefore I have this fear of delegating is by definition making the thing come out worse. And then the third one, and this is the most insidious, is you get into this weird dynamic, and this is what sparked this whole conversation as I was talking about my girlfriend and her experience in management, is that when you sort of train the people under you, that you will ultimately solve their problems, and you find yourself in this weird sort of hybrid world where you're trying to train them to be self-sufficient, you're trying to train them to replace you, but you're always kind of having to swoop in to save the day. I think this happens to you probably on the sales side sometimes. And so I'm curious, like, how do you overcome these kinds of obstacles and truly build an organization or have a situation where there are things that are handled that you do not need to oversee or know about or care about? Is that even something you can get to, or are you always going to sort of, like how possible is that? And how do you overcome some of these barriers to like real handoff, sleep well at night delegation? If you are a creative professional who wants to improve your relationship with money, go to millionairehairstylistpodcast.com, create a free student account, and you can access an entire library of educational resources geared at improving your financial well-being, including a lesson on the 3 phases of wealth building for creative professionals. Go to millionairehairstylistpodcast.com and sign up today.
All right, there's a lot to unpack there. But okay, so if we're just going to answer the question, is it possible to do this well? Yes, absolutely. I've seen it done really well by a lot of people, a lot of business leaders. There's companies out there with tens of thousands of employees, right? And so we have militaries, with hundreds of thousands of people in them that are organized to a degree. One, you have to let go of the idea that people are going to do everything the way you want them to do it. That's not really the point. It's to get them to operate and think independently based on the principles that made you successful. Not, would you do this exactly the way? It's, can I get people to think and make decisions independently in a way that is even better than I would, but give them a principled foundation? Because they're going to be spending, principled foundation means, what are the things that I think about and how do I think about things? How do I solve problems in a way that has created this really nice and unique track record for me? So if you think about that as a leader in your business, you start coming up with your values. And that's what drives all of those decisions in everything you do. You're down to your customer service, how dedicated you are to mastering your craft. Those all come from internal values, right? So if you can teach the principles for how to think behind decision-making, now you start building autonomous performers. And what you'll find will happen is those people should become better than you, because they'll be focused. You in the beginning were focused on 100 things, right? They are going to be focusing on a few things. So they should be able, with your principles, to become better than you in a shorter period of time. And if you're an excellent developer of talent, you'll see that happen. Like my sales staff, even the new ones, probably a couple months in, are performing better than I can now. They just are. And that's because they have my 10 years of experience. They have all the organizational documents that we've created, all the video trainings for things that I've already tested and gone through. I had to go through all of that one by one experience at a time, document how I did that after I learned that after I realized it works over time and repeated, right? So they get that fast track, one, and then they get the principles and thoughts and the mindset training for when they're experiencing a challenge. And that's really the only time I'll be stepping in is, hey, how do we think about this? How should we think about that? What do I do when I'm not feeling like I'm winning in my job? Because they already know the functions, right? They already know the functions. So I would say this is one rule that we have in our business. If you can get an employee to perform at 80% satisfaction in the skill and trade in the beginning, in the training phase, that is A-okay. That's great, right? Because you got to be really careful not to treat people like your little perfection project. Right? Your goal is not to turn the key and twist the knife just to get them to perform and do the little dance exactly how you want them to do it. One, that's going to kill your work culture because people thrive on autonomy and making their own decisions and having control. So anytime you can give people autonomy and control over the decisions, they're going to perform better, hands down. If you're the one doing the puppeteering, you'll be miserable and they'll be miserable. The second thing is, how do we do that? How do we actually do this well? And I think the 2 things that have really helped me delegate well is, one, implementing a delegation tool. So we use Monday.com. My assistant has her own board. There's a section of that board where I just go in. Anytime I have something I need her to do, I drop it on the board, I give it a priority, and I give it a deadline, and I give her the notes that anything needs to be done, right? Any pertinent information. Over time, her job is, if that's a repeated task, is to add that to the manual with instructions on what I just taught you. So we have a growing video training library and a manual so that in case she ever steps away, someone else can step right into that role and she can promote herself out of it, right? So you sort of have to create the organizational systems that you're going to use to be able to communicate and delegate tasks effectively, and then holding them accountable. Now, the second step of that is putting the person in place who is going to do that for you and hold other people accountable for you. And that's when you start hiring a manager, a GM, a CFO, COO, whatever your size of your business. It's your people person, the person who's going to do your weekly touch bases with your employees. They're going to check up on their career path, their performance, and monitor their general needs and handle HR problems and things like that, right? So you've got a couple of different things in a small business. You're not going to have a separate HR business if you got 15, 20 employees, right? You're not going to have a separate HR department and then a general manager and a SVP of X. It's not the structure you're going to have. Once you hire that person, that's the point at which everything becomes 10 times easier if that's the right person. Now, in the beginning, you can expect, depending on the complexity of your business and your trade and your craft, let's say you're a licensed, you're a dentist, you're licensed to practice dentistry, right? You're not going to delegate your dentistry to your manager, right? That's a totally different thing. So you're just working to get you in the role that produces 80% of the business's results. Get into your 20. And so those are the two things: developing an organizational system, how you do things, how you organize, how you delegate, how you shift responsibility from one person to another, how you hold them accountable, how are you going to train them, and then putting a person over that to make sure that it's upheld, it's organized, and it's improved over time. Those are the two things that...
one of the things I want to point out about this, because we've talked about this a lot. In fact, one of the courses that we're in the process of developing is the organized sort of module, or the organized course, which we really talk about, is the way you build people, systems, and tools that help a business grow. So I've worked a lot in film, and in the film world, when you come together and make a commercial, you come together and make a feature film, you're building a new team, often from scratch, that's going to work for 6 to 8 weeks at a time. So there's not really an overarching structure that's going to provide the system. So what you're really depending on is the convention of the industry and the sort of norms, and each person having enough skill set and experience to kind of know how to handle their own department. But what I've really seen very interestingly in that are the companies that have focused extremely hard on trying to build systems within these constantly changing teams and groups and structures of people. And the headline that I've observed from that is, if you decide that you want a business that's scalable, if you decide you want a business that you can hand off to someone and not have to be staring at the ceiling late at night hoping that payroll has been done or that employees have been checked in with, that the process has been followed, you just have to be really serious about it. You have to really, really determine that it matters to you, and you have to impose the sort of immediate stress in the moment. You have to sort of imagine what it's going to be like if you're still trying to do something in 20 years that you could have handed off today. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say it like that is because you have to start documenting now. You have to start documenting what you're doing immediately, because it's not a situation where it's, well, I'm by myself, I'll document when I hire someone. It is, if you don't build a mindset and a process from day one that says, okay, I'm setting up Square payments for the first time. I am setting up the first time that I process a refund for the first time. That first or second time you do that process, you should document that process. You should do that early and often and now, because if you make that your habit, then by definition, it's going to be more likely that people you hire, because of just the way you're showing by demonstration, are going to make it their habit. And more importantly, you're not in a situation where every employee represents 60 hours of documentation you've been wanting to get around to. So there has to be an intentionality. There has to be a forethought. You just have to decide you're serious about it, and you have to, and maybe it's not your favorite thing to do in the world. I don't think anyone really likes like writing down how they did the work they just did. I think most people just want to do the work and move on. Yep. But you have to just imagine a world where this is the key to my future. This is the key to my scalable success. And if you really see it like that, and you have that mindset, and then you're hiring people, and Cash, I know you test people to make sure that they can actually do this. You look at, the Colby Index and these different sort of things to make sure, is the person I'm hiring the kind of person that will follow a process? So you're serious about it. It's like a pseudo professional organizational religion. And what the alternative is, the chaos that causes most small businesses to never scale past their owner and to never really grow, and to sort of limp along with, well, you're going to spend your nights and your weekends picking up after your team because nobody really knew how to do the things that could have allowed you to have your time back.
I think you're dead on there. And I think there's some caveats too that I'd love to add to that thought, because you're right. For most businesses, process-driven businesses that require effective repetition of execution in a specific way to succeed, require systems so that you can onboard efficiently, get them operating quickly, and get them succeeding quickly. There are certain businesses, for example, I have a business where very little is documented and very little is going to be documented. And that is because of the type of business. It might shock you to believe this, Jordan, but take a dentist office, right? From check-in to checkout, you have to have an effective system of order. But think about one of my businesses. We have a content director, and that content director does not have a documented system for how he is connecting with events, right? And putting and connecting with people. And when he goes to an event, he doesn't have a system for how many people he's going to meet, how many people he's going to connect with, because that role specifically is so dependent on that person's natural. You show up and they are skilled and trained, and we would never hire anyone that couldn't do this extremely well. So it doesn't really need to be documented. His job is, you are going to understand what events are going on in the industry, and you're going to go to those events, and you're going to film those things, and you're going to show up, and you're going to get on camera, and you're going to get tons of content, because we're putting out 150 pieces of content a week. So all I need to know is, are you putting out 150 pieces of content a week that meet the brand content guidelines? There's nothing else that needs to be documented, because the systems are, do we have a videographer? Okay, the videographer needs to know what they're doing. We're not going to train someone in videography systems. That's a totally different thing. And it's a totally different type of person. And that type of person is not the person who needs a document. And you're never going to hire someone into that role who's going to need that document.
Fair. Well, so the balayage artist doesn't need a manual how to do balayage either. You hire someone who has the skill. You know what I mean? So that there's a comparable in the hairstyling world, which is like the specialty roles aren't necessarily documented in the same way.
Right. Exactly. They're not documented in the same way. Your internal systems, for example, how we do manufacturing in my manufacturing business, documented. Why? Because of safety rules, right? Efficiency. Manufacturing is all about efficiency. The assembly line, right? All of that. When someone steps into a manufacturing facility, you don't know how it's being operated. So you have to have video trainings on safety. You've got to have, tests that they pass before they get on the floor, all that kind of stuff for quality of product production, all those types of things. Those documented. So in the example of a salon, a restaurant, nearly everything should be a well-oiled, documented system that someone can step into an ELMS and learn. And an ELMS is a whole nother topic we could talk about.
Yeah. What is the management system that you use? I know a lot of restaurants use Opus. I think you're using a different platform for one of your companies. But again, I think it's very easy to sort of do that thing like, oh, okay, so I have to go get some software. And it's no, a Google Doc with screen captures that you do in QuickTime. If you have a Mac right now, which most people do, I can't speak for Windows. I'm sure there's something comparable to Windows, but every Mac comes with QuickTime, and QuickTime has a screen recorder feature that'll use your microphone. So, and by the way, for the people that don't like to write, I don't like to write things, Cash. So our Millionaire Hairstylist operating manual, your shit, excuse my French, your stuff is all written out. My stuff is just go watch this video, because I'm much better at just showing and talking. Mm-hmm. But either way, I think, and credit to you for imposing this on us, is, you and I are at a place now where there's almost nothing that we do where we don't look at the document and go, did we document that? And that's an important mindset. And I think the other thing that's important is, I won't even touch with the 10-foot pole the legalities of hiring and firing as far as the local laws are in your particular municipality or state. And obviously you need someone, an attorney that handles things like employment, to make sure you're compliant with all the rules around what information and documentation you need to fire. But having systemized, documented processes is a starting point for having a standard with which to hold your employees to, so that if you have someone that is underperforming, you have a pathway to documenting that they're underperforming. If you say to someone, this is the process by which we welcome a guest in our salon, and you can show repeatedly that they're not following that process, it's not, oh, well, you told me that thing once and I just didn't remember, and you never told me, and so I didn't know it was a process. It's in the manual, so that gives you a foundation of which to measure performance in whatever metrics matter to you. Mm-hmm. And it gives you something to sort of hold people accountable to, that is not just you running around playing whack-a-mole with all the things that you think need to happen, that you're just telling people need to happen in the moment, but you haven't taken the time to actually document. It's an extremely powerful tool from an ongoing.
It is. And it's what I find is most confusing for new entrepreneurs building their business, or in the season of trying to delegate and trying to organize their business. One, you do not want to be doing this when it's time to delegate. That is
right.
It's just yeah, it's going to suck. You're not going to do it. And most likely you're just not going to do it because it's too painful, too time consuming. And you don't have the time to do it. Your business will suffer for a long season if you have to do it retroactively. It is much easier to have a personal assistant help you with these things. Like, oh my gosh, I'm running around with a chicken with my head cut off. You meet with your personal assistant. Look, I need you to start documenting everything I do. So if I'm going to, throughout the day, I just need you to like make a list of all the stuff I do. And then I'm going to set an hour aside and meet with you. And you're going to just ask me, how do you do that? You're going to record me doing a video if I can just explain it with words. You're going to record screen share stuff if I need to do it on a screen. If I need to give a visual demonstration, we can schedule time for those things. But getting someone to help you get this stuff out of your head and into a training manual, like a syllabus, is huge. But the big challenge I think that people have with organizing in this way and delegating and making sure that the information gets put together and communicated effectively so that the results can be repeated is, where do I stop with this level of documentation? Where do I start? Where do I stop? Because do I need to document how I open the door? I've had people ask that question. Do I need to document how I open the door? Well, if you're hiring for a new manager and you're putting a training together for a manager, like what I would do is I would hire for that role and then have that person start documenting and making it part of the job description and part of the job success metrics that say, hey, your first month here, I need you to document how you open the salon, how you close the salon, how you run the POS. I want all that documented. And I'm going to show you as we go through training you, we're just going to record those sessions of me training you. And then you have an entire course of video trainings or whatever it is that you're using on how to do that. We're currently using video trainings for almost everything. And we're implementing quizzes and things like that so that when we hire new employees, we get them onboarded much faster through online training. And Jordan, I mean, like sophisticated restaurants are doing this. There's most businesses.
The ones that care about their margins.
Yes.
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A does this.
100%. If you don't think you're being handed an iPad when you start in any of these modern establishments and the iPad has videos on it that you're going to watch and be quizzed on, like that is how it operates. And with the cost of these systems, e-learning systems are getting cheaper and cheaper. I mean, everything's getting cheaper from a software as a service perspective. So there's not a lot of excuses to not do this.
One question you can ask yourself to determine what needs to be documented and what doesn't is this something that if it is not repeated in the same way that I do it or that I want it done, will harm the company, will be a detriment to the company's performance? It's got to be repeated this way. Otherwise, my team will fail and the company will fail. If it's not important, don't touch it. That is a huge way to eliminate 50% of the documentation burden when you look at the list. If you go through that list and it's how to answer my emails, if that is not actually important to be repeated in a specific way, I don't tell my personal assistant how to answer my emails unless there is a specific type, like we do have documented how to handle bill requests, right? So if bill pay stuff comes in, where to send that, she needs to know how to do that. That's documented. But as far as like, I'm not going to scripting out every email for her. So there's just certain things you got to ask the question, does this need to be repeated in this exact way for that person to achieve success in that role? If it doesn't, give them freedom and autonomy and just hire great people.
I would say the takeaway here, and we can bring this to a close, and then certainly we'll have more on this in our organized course, but I think the takeaway is start now. Whatever, if it's an Apple Note, like I don't care. Write down what you're doing in a given day, and anything that's being done consistently in a particular way in your business, make note of that. And then to your point, Cash, as soon as you can hand off that process of documentation, the better, because it might be a drag on you and it might be something that causes you to do it less. If you can find someone to offload that to, do that. But don't wait to hire. Don't wait to grow to lay the foundation for that growth. And so much of that foundation is just the system, the organizational and operational system of your business, and putting yourself in position to hand that off to competent people who can carry the torch for you so that you can sleep well at night, so that you can have a weekend, so that you can go away for a week, so that you can be in the hospital, so that anything can happen and your business can still run without you. That is really the goal. If you're a hairstylist, if you're a creative professional, and you are interested in your financial well-being, remember to like and subscribe so that more episodes just like this one show up in your YouTube feed.